Hello students, let's start the next topic, dual nature of radiation and matter. Till now we have discussed about the electromagnetic waves and later the photoelectric effect, and then we discussed about we have introduced the particle nature, and there we have discussed it, right, that electromagnetic wave, which is nothing but the light, is having the dual nature. Okay, so now we are going slowly towards the matter duality too, which means the matter also exhibits the dual nature. Okay, what do you mean by matter? Amount of that substance, and that substance is made up of all the subatomic particles, right? Atoms, proton, which are nothing but protons, neutrons, all these are made up of atoms, sir. So now we are going to discuss about that duality. Okay, so this first idea was given by Louis de Broglie, the scientist, because the wave theory, what earlier was before believed, gave the detailed explanation regarding the interference, diffraction and polarization, of course reflection and refraction phenomena also. Regarding the interference, diffraction and polarization, you will understand in your wave optics chapter, which you have, which will be completed later. Right, coming to the next one, the quantum theory, which discussed precisely about the particle nature of the radiation, successfully explained the phenomena of photoelectric effect, Compton effect, black body radiations, X-ray spectra and so on. Regarding this Compton effect and X-ray spectra, you don't have in your syllabus, while photoelectric effect we have already discussed how the interaction will be of. Black body radiations you have studied in your 11th standard. Okay, it's all these are precisely the same. Compton effect also will explains that whenever X-ray photon, I am speaking about the Compton effect, whenever an X-ray radiation of having a single wavelength falls on a particular strong target, that after the scattering, the scattered beam contains both the frequencies, which is nothing but greater the wavelengths too, which means simply to say, when a beam of monochromatic rays are incident on a substance which is nothing but the target, they will get scattered. The wavelength of the scattered X-rays is greater than the wavelength of incident rays. So scattered rays will possess greater wavelength than the incident. That was actually given by the Compton effect. Anyway, you don't need to worry about that. You don't have all this X-ray, neither X-ray spectra nor Compton effect you don't have. So coming to this, and as we are very well know that the matter is made up of all these subatomic particles, right? Thus, just like how radiations have dual nature, like wave theory here which I have seen, and now here we have speak about the particle nature. The wave has a particle nature. That's it, right? Which you have already seen. That is wave and wave have particle nature. Now, de Broglie suggested that as the entire matter is made up of electrons, protons, neutrons, they also will possess the dual nature, which is nothing but the fundamental building blocks, subatomic particles, right? So because of these combination and all, because of this, the entire whatever the structures we are actually going to discuss about these are all made up of. So all these particles, fundamental subatomic particles, electrons, protons, neutrons, all these, they also will possess dual nature, and thus they also can have particle as well as wave nature. You can ask me that, sir, how this was actually being believed, or why this kind of situation we have to believe, which means why the particles also will possess the dual nature. The thing is, material particle, actually the de Broglie hypothesis is material particles which are in motion should display this wave-like properties, and his points of considerations are nothing but the first and foremost is E equal to mc square. He used the equation, Einstein's mass energy equivalence, using the concept E equal to mc square is his first idea, which equates mass and energy equivalence, right? And his second thing is nature loves symmetry, which since because radiation has dual nature, which we have already seen. Therefore, according to the symmetry, the scientist de Broglie thought that matter also should possess the dual nature. Therefore, the material particles like electrons, protons, neutrons, they should also behave like mass points, and they should exhibit wave nature when they are in motion. And these waves which are associated with material particles in motion are called matter waves or de Broglie waves. The waves associated with material particles which are in motion are called matter waves or de Broglie waves, we can simply call it as, and respectively their wavelength is called as de Broglie wavelength. Later anyway we will derive the equation. Okay, no need to worry about that. So what are the suggestions? The universe is made, the nature law symmetry, the universe is made up of particles and radiation, both entities must be symmetrical. Symmetry, nature laws, which is nothing but, and of course basing on the mass energy equivalence. Because you can ask me, sir, what is the use of this? Was okay, sir, symmetry condition is okay, because physics is nothing but the verification of the laws which are already existing in the nature. So as nature law symmetry, that's all okay, fine. What is the need of taking this E equal to mc square, which is an Einstein's condition? It's as simple as that. Anything, the physical quantities, that is nothing but energy and mass, will govern all the forms of the physical universe, which is nothing but mass and energy. Mass and energy, they will govern all the rules, which is nothing but, if you consider about the work done, whatever the energy stored or whatever the energy spent will be converted into the work done, or whatever the work done will be converted into energy. So in any of the situation, these two, energy and mass, they govern all the laws, so they rule that. So that's what the reason why we have taken their equivalence, energy and mass equivalence, and according to the nature basic fundamental rule, that nature law symmetry, we can prove this. Okay, right. Now let's go to the de Broglie wavelength and hypothesis, and later on how he has calculated the expressions for matter waves, and what are the properties, which is nothing but, now we are going to discuss about that. So first of all, if you consider the particle, which is actually if this particular particle is in motion, the motion of this particular particle can be associated with a wave, which is nothing but the wave what we are actually drawing here describes or guides the motion of the particle, which means at what points the particle is having a maximum displacement and at what point the particle is having a minimum displacement with respect to a fixed point. Are you getting the point here? Right. And the waves associated with the moving particles are known as de Broglie waves or matter waves, which we are actually speaking about here. So as we have taken that from the quantum theory, of course that's it, right? E equal to every particle, energy particle will be having a frequency E equal to h nu, and also E equal to h nu. Particle nature, that's what, right? Quantum theory states that. So and in the place of nu, I am going to replace the c by lambda as they travel with the. So and according to the Einstein's mass energy equivalence, E equal to mc square. Now can I equate them? Mc square equal to hc by lambda. From that, lambda equal to h cancels out anyway, h by mc. Can I write down? Can I write down that? Of course, mc square equal to hc by lambda. Cc cancels out. That's what I am doing here. So lambda equal to hc by mc. What do you mean by this mc? Mass into velocity of light, which is nothing but momentum, since because momentum of photons will travel with the speed of light, right? Hence lambda equal to h by p. Are we clear with this? Suppose if we consider that this entire equation in terms of the voltage what we have applied, later anyway I will prove that. So first of all, focus on this equation. From this alone we can get this. Okay, if we are having a material particle, which means instead of a photon, if we have a particle of mass m moving with a velocity v, then the same equation can be given as lambda equal to h by mv, which is the expression for de Broglie wavelength. Okay, right. What are the conclusions we can made here? So as lambda equal to h by mv, now remember this conditions whatever we are going to draw, these are nothing but the final conclusions what we can give by basing on this equation. Look here carefully. As lambda equal to h by mv, of course h by p, this is nothing but the de Broglie wave equation. Okay, so this equation is for material particles, and this explains the dual nature of matter as it connects both the wave characteristic lambda and particle characteristic momentum. You notice there carefully. Generally, whenever we speak about the wavelength, we speak lambda for wave. That's it, right? Wavelength will be given for, while momentum will be given for particle. So momentum will be given for particle. So in this equation, whatever we got, we are actually relating both these, lambda equal to h by mv or h by p, either is true. Are you getting the point here? Now let's look about the various properties. Okay, de Broglie wavelength is inversely proportional to the velocity of the particle. If the particle moves faster, wavelength will be smaller, and vice versa. Lambda for a particular particle. Anyway, h is Planck's constant, which is a constant. Mass of that constant particle is a constant. So lambda is inversely proportional to v. Greater the velocity, lesser will be the wavelength. So if the particle moves faster and faster, wavelength associated with that will be very less. Okay. If the particle is at rest, then de Broglie wavelength is infinite. Such a wave cannot be visualized. Understand that carefully. If v equal to 0, that means if the particle is at rest, then the particles which are not in motion, there is no concept of matter wave. That's what the reason why we told matter waves are associated with the particles which are in motion. Okay, de Broglie wavelength is inversely proportional to mass of the particle. The wavelength associated with a heavier particle is smaller than that with a lighter particle. So you might have get the doubt, sir, that we are also made up of all these electrons and protons, right? Then do we also associate with matter waves? Actually we do, but that association we cannot, since because heavier the mass, lesser will be the wavelength. Lambda is inversely proportional to mass. So greater the mass, lesser will be the wavelength. So that's what the reason why we speak about the particle nature is this wave nature is associating with those regarding this matter waves. We are speaking about those elementary particles alone, subatomic particles, which are nothing but, okay. And matter waves like electromagnetic waves can travel, just matter waves can travel in vacuum. Don't confuse here. Matter waves can travel like electromagnetic waves in vacuum, and hence they are not mechanical waves. So for the transportation of the matter wave from one particular point to another particular point, they need not any medium. And most importantly, de Broglie wavelength is independent of charge, which means neutrons also will possess matter waves. Neutrons are chargeless, right? So even for neutrons also matter waves do exist, and they cannot be, which means nothing but de Broglie waves cannot be the electromagnetic in nature, because electromagnetic waves are only associated with accelerated charged particles. Remember, right? So that's what the reason why I am telling here. So when you consider the electromagnetic wave, electromagnetic waves are produced by the accelerated charges, while here we are not speaking about the accelerated charges. When the particle is in motion or not, that's enough for us. So these waves which are associated with which are nothing but which are in motion, then we can. And also there is no concept of charge here. While electromagnetic waves are nothing but being produced by accelerated charges, while here matter waves are associated with the neutrons too. Okay, and most important point is whenever we speak about this matter waves, which is nothing but this particular condition, this matter waves, whenever we speak, they are like probability waves, amplitude of which gives the probability of existence of the particle at the point, which means we cannot simultaneously identify that both particle and wave nature at a time. Until now we do, until today, even for today, we don't have any particular experimental setup in order to explain both the natures at a time. No experimental setup has been given for us. So at a stretch or at a particular point or at a instant of time, we cannot show both these particular conditions, which is nothing but both this particle nature as well as the wave nature also. Are you getting the point here? Okay, ma? Right. So for one more point, I am repeating this. For macroscopic size objects, which are nothing but like car, human bodies, all this, we cannot define for this. They are very small. The wavelength associated with will be very small and very difficult for us to detect the wave properties also. Okay. while for the very smaller particles like electron, proton and all that, we can go for the wavelength observations and all. Okay, right. Now let's look at the next one, de Broglie wavelength of an electron. So when you consider an electron, let's see how we can calculate the de Broglie wavelength of a particular electron. Suppose we have an electron of mass m and charge e. Let v be the velocity. Look there, I am representing both the things in same, don't confuse there. This is potential, capital V, while small v represents the velocity. So you can observe the font, there is a difference in font. So if v is the velocity, final velocity attained by the electron when it is accelerated from rest through a potential difference v volts, then kinetic energy gained by the electron equals to the work done on the electron by the electric field. So can I equate this now? So half mv square is equals to p square by 2m, which is nothing but kinetic energy momentum relation. So p square by 2m equal to ev. From there, can I write down that p equal to square root of 2m ke? That's it, right? So p equal to square root of 2m ke will be nothing but kinetic energy is equal to ev, right? So in the place of that, so 2m ev can I write down? And as we know that lambda equal to h by p, I am going to substitute that, and upon substituting the standard values, because we know Planck's constant, we know mass of the electron, we know the charge of the electron. So 12.3 by root v standard value ma, this is for electron. Remember, this is for an electron. 12.3 by root v is a standard value. If we know the mass of the proton, we can calculate charge of the proton. We can similarly calculate for the proton too. Similarly for a deuteron, similarly for an alpha particle, similarly for a neutron. So if we know the particular value of all this mass and charge, we can calculate the matter wave for the wavelength, matter wave wavelength here, or the de Broglie wavelength, which you can call it as. Suppose if we have considered a random value of 120 volts, let's say suppose, not a random actually, by the experimental arrangements we can understand. So if you consider a 120 volts, which is nothing but an experimental value of the voltage, we can have the wavelength of 0.112 nanometer, and this wavelength is in the same order as the spacing between interatomic planes in a crystal. So when you consider an interatomic spacing, when you consider a crystal, the interatomic spacing is equal to the wavelength of this, and that's what, right, particle will associated with the maximum displacement of that. So that's what it is. So are you getting the point here? And this was actually detected theoretically by de Broglie, and this he actually proved also by the electron diffraction experiments. Later it was done, and because of this work, de Broglie has been awarded with a Nobel Prize, okay, because of the discovery of wave nature of the electron. Later these de Broglie wavelength equations and as well as this entire theory has been experimentally verified by Davison and Germer. Both are the scientist names that we'll discuss in the next. Okay, right. Okay, look at the next one, Davison and Germer experiment. Attention students, just a small note, for this academic year this particular Davison and Germer experiment has been removed from the syllabus. It has been removed for this academic year and the new curriculum what we got, but just I am giving you a small introduction like thing, so that the concept will be very clear for you, what how it can be done and all. Okay, right. So first of all, you can see the setup there. There is an electron gun that shoots the electrons. So electron gun is nothing but it which shoots out the electrons. So this is what here. From there, the beam is falling on a nickel crystal. The tough metals we are actually taking nickel. When once these electron beam hits this particular the nickel crystal, it will be scattered. You can notice here, or you can call it as diffracted beam, which means from here there. And that diffracted beam can be noticed, can be observed by using a detector. And remember, this detector is a movable one. Of course, from the detector it will be given to the galvanometer, where you can notice the current. That's it, right? Flow of the electrons, right? All these are so current, in the form of current it will be. This is a movable detector, so that the moment when you change the particular glancing angle here, which is nothing but the theta, the scattering angle phi will be varied. That's obvious, right? So thus the scattered beam or the diffracted beam can be caught here. So that was the mobile detector uses, Right. For this, observe the figure carefully. Can I write down that theta plus phi is equal to 180 degree? Right. Later, if we plot a graph for applied voltage and direction of incident electrons of this phi, which is nothing but, if we plot a graph, the maximum intensity, or you can call it as the whatever the electrons which are being falling on this, have shown a maximum scattering at a particular value of phi equal to 50 degree, which is nothing but maximum scattering angle for phi equal to 50 degree, and correspondingly the voltage at that particular point what we have applied is 54 volts. Okay, so if we go for that values, if I substitute that in the equation, so what I can get here, 2 theta equal to 130, 180 minus 50, right, 130, theta equal to 65 degree, because I have substituted phi to be 50 degree here. Do you understand that condition here? Theta plus phi plus theta is equal to 180 for this crystal lattice, whatever, on a particular plane, right. So now for the first principle maximum, later in wave optics you will understand the condition for maxima and minima. Okay, for the first principle of the maxima, n equal to 1, you can write down that Bragg's equation, n lambda equal to 2d sin theta. If I substitute the values here, I can get lambda equal to 1.65 angstrom. This theoretically proves, which is nothing but the interatomic spacing of that, of the nickel, whatever the crystal, nickel crystal we have taken. So which is clearly stating that the Bragg's the matter wave equation or the de Broglie wavelength equation is true. Now let's look about the graphs. So, and before that, sorry, forgot, let me introduce the Bragg's equation for you. So I told you right just now, I think you might have seen this in your chemistry, but I'm not sure about the equation wavelength condition, whether you got this or not. Anyway, regarding the path difference, phase difference, all this anyway you will understand in the wave optics, so no doubt about that. So first of all, let's understand what do you mean by this path difference and all, and the maxima minima conditions also you will. Imagine this is an incident beam, this is the crystal lattice, this is our crystal lattice, and you can see the atoms here. Okay, when light radiation falls on it, look here, some of the one ray is actually falling on the first layer and getting reflected. Second ray is passing through this crystal lattice, diffracted, and it's touching here and again diffracted here. Now the distance traveled by both these rays, is it same? Is it same? Which is nothing but the path traveled by both these two rays. Let me give the number 1 and 2. The distance traveled by both the first ray and second ray, is it same? Obviously no. Then how we can find out the extra path, extra length traveled by 2? How we can get? That's obvious, right? 1 is having a shortest path while 2 has traveled more. So for that, here is a point of incidence for this first ray, right? So let's drop 2 perpendiculars onto the second ray. These are the perpendiculars which you can notice here. Now here we got a right angle triangle. If the interatomic separation, which we call it as D, if we call that to be, then can I write down, let's give some naming for this, A, B, and let's call M and N, let's say suppose. So ABN is a triangle, and as well as AMB is also a rectangle triangle. Apply the sin theta opposite side by hypotenuse. Hypotenuse is already D, so now opposite will be D sin theta. Similarly for this triangle also D sin theta. The moment when I would draw the perpendiculars from this incident point onto the second, this distance, which is nothing but from, let's say suppose I'll call it as O, O1, O2, let's say suppose. Let's say this is A dash. So the moment when this is M, the moment when I draw the perpendicular here, O1A and O2M, are you getting the point here? Let me erase this one, it's not needed. So understand this carefully. The moment when I drop the perpendicular onto this, O1A, this distance O1A and as well as O2m, this distance, they became equal. Now what is the extra path length that second ray has travelled? MB plus BN. Of course, respectively here also, if I consider this to be O double dash and as well as O double 2. So the extra here also the same thing, right? A O double dash is nothing but this distance. When I drop the perpendicular here, again these two are same. N O2 are same. What about the extra difference? Bn. So now extra path length travelled is nothing but MB plus Bn. D sin theta plus D sin theta. What was that? 2D sin theta. And for the maximum interference, or for the maximum condition, this path difference should be equal to n lambda, integral multiples of the wavelength, and this equation is called Bragg's equation. In crystal diffraction techniques you will get this Bragg's equation. I think you might have get this in a solid state. If not so, just I am giving you the introduction for this Bragg's equation. N lambda equal to 2D sin theta. Remember this, one of the important equations in crystallography. We'll use this more. Okay, right. Now let's come back to the topic, Davison and Germer experiment, the graphs. So when you consider the intensity of the scattered beam and as well as the incident beam direction, look here, which you can notice clearly for these particular for this particular experiment, what are the values we got. So if this is the incident beam direction for 44 volts, this is the pattern, scattering pattern. For 48 volts, this is what, while for 54 volts incident scattered beam is 50 degree with respect to the horizontal I am speaking about. Now look here, the intensity peak is maximum. That's it, right? Out of all these, this peak is maximum. While again if I increase this voltage to furthermore, look here, again I got a depression. That's it, right? Intensity got reduced. So the maximum is at 54 volts. That's what the reason why I have substituted in that equation, that theta plus phi plus theta equal to 180. No, there I have substituted phi to be as 50 degree. Are we clear with this? Right. Now if we plot a graph between intensity versus square root of anode potential, look here, square root of anode potential what we have applied. In the previous we have seen about the direction of an incident beam versus the potential. Now this is for the intensity versus square root of the potential. Will be useful while solving the problems and as well as for the discussions too. So root V, 54, right? So 54 root will be obvious. 8 8s are 64, 7 7s 49. So this root 54 will be between those two. So that's what it is. You can notice here. Okay, clearly, right? So if I continue to incident the electrons more and more on the crystal, look here the pattern. For 100 electrons, the diffraction pattern is like this. Alternate bright and dark fringes, you can call it to be like very pale. While for 3000 electrons, look here, we got a particular kind of scintillations on that. While for diffraction pattern after 7000 electrons, look here, you can see dark, bright, you can see here, this is the dark, bright. You can ask me, sir, they are all merged together, how you are actually saying that? Relatively, you can say that. All these techniques were very the older kind of, later now we have a very greater magnifying techniques now we have anyway. So this was the earlier what that in the Davison Germer experiment they got. Okay, right. Now let's discuss about one of that such kind of what you call that higher precise instrument which we have. Mostly you might have listened about this electron microscope. Let me give that introduction for that. Electron microscope. What you mean by an electron microscope? We know already about the general or the normal kind of the microscope, right? Electron microscope gives you which is nothing but it is also like an important application of de Broglie waves. And this particular electron microscope is designed to study very minute object like virus, microbes and the crystal structures of the solids. Okay, and it works on the principle that when light like radiations like electron beams behaves as waves but with much smaller wavelengths, and using this electric and magnetic fields, electron beams can be focused just as ordinary light beams, and they are focused by the glass lens. And remember in mind that magnifying power of this microscope is inversely related with the wavelength of the radiation which you are actually using. Okay, and when we are accelerating this with a potential difference of V volts, the wavelength which can be given as it is 12.3 by root V voltage. This is angstrom. I am speaking about electron microscope. Are you getting the point here? So this is mostly used to study about very small things, like very small study of minute objects which are nothing but like a virus, microbes, and as well as crystal structures too. Okay, you can treat like this to be as like one of the application of de Broglie wavelength too. Okay, so when normal kind of with an optical microscope, the magnification is 1500 is possible. In the end of the ray optics, you have the devices there, you will understand what is magnification and all. So to this large extent what we can see, but the wavelength criteria we have. So this limit, whatever that 1500 magnification we are having, is not sufficient in order to study these objects, very smaller kind of. So if you consider a suitable value of the potential, and if we are able to provide the electron beam properly, and if we are incident that properly on that case, then this electron microscope can give us almost nearly the larger magnification, very high magnification of the order 1 lakh, which is nothing but 1 lakh magnification is possible. Okay, and thus in an electron microscope the electrons are focused with the help of electric and magnetic lenses, which are nothing but. Keep that in mind. Are we clear with this? Remember, this is also one of like an application for you, which is for this particular de Broglie wavelength. Just give a reading in your NCERT so that you will understand this particular concept very clearly. More of the theoretical concepts, both are all these. Okay, thank you.